The CEO's bodyguard was the only man he could trust. But why was he the only man the CEO could trust? And what made that trust so important? Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional story. Thank you for being here with us and for continuing to support the channel. Now, tell us in the comments, if you were in the CEO's position, could you trust only one person with your life and your deepest secrets? Stay with us as we step into a story of trust, loyalty, and an unexpected connection between two men whose lives are about to become deeply intertwined. If you want to survive this job, never trust anyone in this building. Adrian Cole stopped halfway through the executive hallway and looked at the man who had just said it. Ethan Hayes stood several feet away, dressed in a dark suit, calm and completely unimpressed by the fact that Adrian was the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in Manhattan. Adrian was used to people choosing their words carefully around him. He was used to employees smiling when they were nervous, investors pretending to agree, and strangers wanting something from him. Trust had become a luxury he could no longer afford. "Are you giving me advice?" Adrian asked. Ethan glanced toward the glass walls surrounding the executive floor. "I am giving you a warning." That answer should have irritated him. Instead, Adrian felt something he had not expected: curiosity. Ethan Hayes had been hired as his personal bodyguard that morning, and unlike everyone else in Adrian's life, he had not tried to impress him. He had not praised his success. He had not asked about his private life. He had simply studied the building, the people inside it, and every entrance and exit as if Adrian's safety were a puzzle that needed solving. "I did not ask for a bodyguard," Adrian said. "Your board did. Then your contract is with them. My responsibility is with you." Adrian gave him a cold smile. "You sound very confident." Ethan met his eyes. "I am." For some reason, that confidence bothered Adrian more than arrogance ever could. He turned and continued toward his office. Ethan followed at a respectful distance. "There are rules," Adrian said. "I do not need someone following me everywhere. I do not need someone standing outside every meeting. I do not need questions about where I go or who I see." "Understood." Adrian stopped again. "That was easy. You were clear. Most people argue. Most people are not responsible for keeping you safe." Adrian studied him. There was something strange about Ethan. He did not sound impressed by Adrian's wealth, but he did not resent it either. He simply seemed focused. As Adrian entered his office, Ethan remained near the door, quietly observing the room. "What are you looking for?" Adrian asked. "Anything that does not belong." Adrian glanced around. Everything appeared normal. His desk, his computer, the city beyond the windows, the framed photographs he rarely looked at anymore. "And do you see anything?" Ethan's expression changed slightly. "Not yet." Adrian sat behind his desk. "You know, people have worked for me for years. I have an entire security team." "I know. Then why are you here?" Ethan looked directly at him. "Because someone believes your existing security is not enough." Adrian leaned back. "Who?" Ethan did not answer immediately. That hesitation caught Adrian's attention. "Mr. Hayes, I am still checking the information." "What information?" "The people around you." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "You think someone close to me is a problem?" Ethan's voice remained calm. "I think you should be more careful about the people you already trust." The words settled over the room. Adrian had heard plenty of warnings in his life, but never one that felt so personal. He looked toward the windows, watching Manhattan move far below. "I trust very few people." Ethan's answer came quietly. "Then you are already ahead of most CEOs." Adrian almost smiled. Almost. His phone began to ring. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He ignored it. A moment later, it rang again. Ethan noticed. Adrian noticed him noticing. "Do not start," Adrian said. "I did not say anything. You were thinking it." Ethan looked toward the phone. "You should not answer that." Adrian stared at him. "Why?" Ethan's eyes moved back to his. "Because I have a feeling whoever is calling already knows you are here." For the first time that morning, Adrian did not have an immediate response. He looked at his phone again. The screen went dark. The call had ended. Then a message appeared. Adrian read it once. His expression changed. Ethan noticed immediately. "What does it say?" Adrian slowly turned the phone face down. "Nothing important." Ethan watched him for a long moment. "That is not true." Adrian looked up. "You have been working for me for less than an hour." Ethan remained perfectly calm. "And you have already lied to me twice." Silence filled the office. Adrian should have been angry. Instead, something unfamiliar stirred inside him. Not fear, not trust, something in between. Because Ethan was the first man in a very long time who seemed willing to tell him the truth, even when Adrian clearly did not want to hear it. And Adrian had a feeling that before this was over, the one man he least wanted to trust might become the only man he could. By noon, Adrian had already broken 3 of Ethan's rules without realizing it. The first happened when Adrian walked into a crowded conference room without telling him. The second happened when he dismissed a security concern because he was already 10 minutes late for a meeting. The third happened when he answered the unknown number from that morning. Ethan noticed all 3. He did not complain. He simply watched, and somehow that was worse. "You are doing it again," Ethan said as Adrian stepped out of the conference room. Adrian stopped. "Doing what?" "Ignoring me." Adrian turned around. "I am the CEO. It is part of my job. Ignoring safety concerns is not. You have been my bodyguard for 4 hours. 4 hours and 17 minutes. Adrian stared at him. Ethan's expression remained completely serious. "You counted?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you keep making my job difficult." Adrian almost laughed. "Almost." Instead, he continued walking. "Then perhaps you should find another job." Ethan followed. "I considered that." Adrian stopped so suddenly that Ethan nearly walked into him. "You did?" "For about 3 seconds." Adrian looked at him, trying to decide whether Ethan was joking. The problem was that he could never tell. Ethan's face gave away almost nothing. That was becoming increasingly frustrating. "You are impossible," Adrian said. "I have heard that before." They reached the elevator. Adrian pressed the button. Ethan stood beside him, watching the hallway instead of the doors. "You know," Adrian said, "most bodyguards are less irritating. Most bodyguards are probably less observant." The elevator arrived. Adrian stepped inside. Ethan followed. "What exactly are you observing?" Adrian asked. "People." "Which people?" "Everyone." Adrian sighed. "That is helpful." Ethan looked at him. "You want names?" Adrian's expression changed. "Yes." Ethan lowered his voice. "The man who entered the conference room 6 minutes after you. The assistant who left when you arrived. The person who called you twice this morning. And the employee who has been watching us since we left your office." Adrian looked toward the polished elevator doors. "You are serious?" "Yes." "Why did you not tell me sooner?" "Because I wanted to know whether you had noticed." Adrian turned toward him. "And you did not." That answer irritated Adrian more than it should have. "You seem to enjoy being right." "I enjoy keeping you safe." The elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped into the lobby, but Ethan caught his attention with one quiet sentence. "Do not go to the restaurant tonight." Adrian turned. "Excuse me. You have dinner scheduled at 8. You know my schedule already? Your assistant gave it to me. And why should I cancel?" Ethan looked at him carefully. "Because the person you are meeting is connected to the number that called you this morning." Adrian felt the air change around him. "Who told you that?" "I checked." "When?" "While you were in your meeting." Adrian stared at him. "You checked my schedule, investigated a phone number, and identified a connection in less than an hour?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" "You would have told me not to." Adrian could not argue with that. The problem was that Ethan was right. Adrian had spent years building a life where every decision belonged to him. He did not like being questioned. He did not like being watched. And he certainly did not like discovering that a stranger could read his habits more accurately than people who had worked beside him for years. "I am going to that dinner," Adrian said. Ethan's expression did not change. "Then I am going with you." "No." That was not a request. Adrian stepped closer. "You work for me." "Correct." "Then you follow my instructions. When they do not compromise your safety." Adrian stared at him. For one strange second, the busy Manhattan lobby seemed to disappear. There was only Ethan, standing calmly in front of him, refusing to be intimidated. Adrian had never met anyone like him. "Fine," Adrian said. "You can come." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." Adrian turned toward the exit. "But you stay out of my conversation." "Of course." "You do not interrupt." "Understood." "And you do not make decisions for me." Ethan paused. "I will do my best." Adrian looked back. That was not reassuring. It was honest. Adrian shook his head and walked outside. A black sedan waited at the curb. Ethan opened the door for him, then looked across the street. His attention lingered for only a moment. Adrian noticed. "What is it?" Ethan looked at him. "Nothing yet." You said that yesterday. Yesterday, I was still learning your routine. Ethan closed the door. Today, I am learning who is watching it. For the first time, Adrian understood that Ethan's presence was not simply another security measure. The man was already digging into the one thing Adrian feared most. The possibility that the danger was not outside his company at all, but somewhere much closer. The restaurant was only 6 blocks from Whitmore Tower, but Adrian felt as though Ethan had been watching him for the entire drive. He was probably right. Ethan sat across from him in the back seat, one hand resting near the door, his attention moving between the windows and Adrian's reflection. You know, Adrian said, most people try to make dinner less uncomfortable. Ethan looked at him. I am not most people. Adrian gave him a tired smile. I have noticed. The car stopped outside the restaurant. Ethan stepped out first and scanned the entrance before opening Adrian's door. Adrian looked at him. You are enjoying this. Enjoying what? Making me feel like I am the least important person in my own life. Ethan's expression softened slightly. That is not what I am trying to do. Then what are you trying to do? Ethan held his gaze. Make sure you get to keep having one. The answer silenced Adrian. Inside, Adrian's business associate, Marcus Reed, was already waiting. Marcus had known Adrian for nearly 8 years. He had helped negotiate major deals, attended private meetings, and even been trusted with information that never reached the board. Adrian had always considered him one of the few people who had earned his confidence. Tonight, however, Ethan remained close enough to observe everything. Adrian noticed the difference immediately. He also noticed that Ethan never interrupted. He stood quietly near the edge of the private dining room, while Adrian and Marcus discussed the upcoming acquisition. For almost 40 minutes, everything seemed normal. Then Marcus mentioned a figure that Adrian had never shared outside the company. Adrian's expression changed. Ethan noticed. That number was confidential, Adrian said. Marcus looked surprised. I thought your finance team had approved it. They have not. Marcus leaned back. Then someone must have mentioned it. Adrian studied him. Ethan said nothing. That silence somehow made Adrian more aware of every word. Marcus quickly changed the subject, but Adrian could not let it go. On the drive back, Ethan remained unusually quiet. You are thinking again, Adrian said. Yes. About Marcus? About the information he knew. Adrian looked out the window. He has been with me for years. That does not make him trustworthy. Adrian turned toward him. You do not trust anyone, do you? Ethan considered the question. Trust is earned. And how long does that take? Sometimes years. Then why do you expect me to trust you after one day? Ethan looked directly at him. I do not. Adrian frowned. You do not. No. Then what do you expect? Nothing. That answer stayed with Adrian long after they returned to the tower. Ethan had every reason to demand respect. Instead, he expected nothing from Adrian. No gratitude. No blind obedience. No personal loyalty. The next morning, Adrian arrived at work earlier than usual. Ethan was already there. You never went home? Adrian asked. I did. When? 4 hours ago. Adrian stared at him. That is not enough sleep. It was enough. You are impossible. Ethan glanced at him. You said that yesterday. I meant it both times. Adrian walked toward his office, then stopped. Ethan. Ethan looked up. Adrian hesitated. Thank you. It was a simple sentence, but Ethan seemed to understand how difficult it was for Adrian to say it. You are welcome. Adrian entered his office. 10 minutes later, Ethan appeared at the door. His expression was different. More serious. I found something. Adrian looked up from his desk. About Marcus? Not exactly. Ethan placed a folder on the table. Your assistant's access card was used after midnight last night. Adrian's face tightened. She was not here. I know. Then who used it? I do not know yet. Adrian opened the folder. There was a security report, a timestamp, and a photograph from a hallway camera. The image was unclear, but one detail stood out. The person had entered the executive floor using an authorized card. Adrian looked at Ethan. Can you identify them? Not from this image. Adrian closed the folder. Then we investigate. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. We? Adrian realized what he had said. For years, he had handled problems alone. Now, without thinking, he had included Ethan. You are my bodyguard, Adrian said. If someone is watching me, I want to know who. Ethan nodded. Then we start with the people closest to you. Adrian looked toward the glass walls of his office. Employees moved through the corridors outside, carrying coffee, documents, and quiet conversations. Everyone looked ordinary. Everyone looked harmless. Yet suddenly, Adrian found himself wondering who among them had access to his life. And for the first time, he realized something even more unsettling. Ethan was the only person in the building he did not have to question. The first person Adrian thought of was Marcus. The second was his assistant, Claire. The third was the one name he did not want to consider at all. Ethan. Adrian stared at the security report on his desk, while Ethan stood silently across from him. The image from the hallway camera remained unclear, but the timestamp was precise. 12:43 in the morning. Someone had used Claire's access card to enter the executive floor, and Adrian knew exactly how difficult it would be to explain that away. "We start with Claire," Adrian said. Ethan nodded. "Agreed. You sound surprised." "I am." Adrian looked up. "Why?" "Because you trusted her." The words were simple, but they landed harder than Ethan probably intended. Adrian closed the folder. "She has worked for me for 6 years." "That was not my question." Adrian studied him. "You really do not make this easy." "I am not trying to." They found Claire in her office 20 minutes later. She looked up from her computer and immediately smiled when Adrian entered. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." Adrian returned the greeting, but his attention remained on Ethan. The bodyguard stood near the door, watching quietly. Claire noticed him. "Is something wrong?" "Your access card was used last night," Adrian said. The smile disappeared from her face. "That is impossible. I was home." "We know," Ethan said. Claire looked at him. "Who are you?" "Ethan Hayes. Adrian's security. I have never seen you before. I started yesterday." Claire looked back at Adrian. "Did someone use my card?" "That is what we are trying to determine." Claire immediately reached into her desk drawer and pulled out her wallet. Her access card was still there. Adrian looked at Ethan. Ethan stepped closer, examining the card without touching it. "When did you last use this?" he asked. "Yesterday afternoon." "Where?" "The executive floor." "And after that?" "I left the building." Ethan nodded. "Did anyone ask to borrow it?" "No." "Did you leave it unattended?" Claire hesitated. For a few minutes. Adrian's expression changed. "Where?" "The break room." Ethan's attention sharpened. "Who was there?" Claire thought for a moment. "A few employees. I do not remember everyone." Ethan thanked her and stepped back. Adrian watched him. "You think she did it?" Ethan shook his head. "No." "Then what are you thinking?" "That someone had access to her card long enough to copy the information." Adrian frowned. "Can someone really do that?" "Yes." Claire looked worried. Adrian noticed. "Claire, go home for the day." "But I have work." That was not a request. She nodded and gathered her things. As she left, Adrian turned toward Ethan. "You did not suspect her?" "No." "How did you know?" Ethan looked at him. "Because she was genuinely surprised." Adrian leaned against the desk. "That is your evidence." "Part of it. You read people." "Sometimes." "You read me too." Ethan's eyes met his. "You are easier." Adrian almost laughed. "That is insulting." "It was not meant to be." "Then what was it meant to be?" Ethan paused. "An observation." For some reason, Adrian could not stop thinking about that answer. He had spent years surrounded by people who claimed to understand him. Ethan was the first person who seemed to actually notice him. Later that afternoon, Adrian and Ethan reviewed the building's security records together. The more they looked, the stranger the pattern became. The access card had been used only once. No files had been opened. No documents were missing. Nothing appeared to have been taken. Then why enter the executive floor? Adrian asked. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. Maybe they were not looking for something. Adrian turned toward him. What else would they be doing? Ethan looked at the security footage. Watching. Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Watching what? Ethan turned to him. You. Silence filled the room. Adrian looked away first. He had spent his entire adult life believing that power made him difficult to reach. Ethan was now suggesting the opposite. Someone had found a way inside his most protected space. Someone knew his schedule. Someone knew his meetings. Someone knew where he would be. And yet, as Adrian looked at Ethan sitting beside him, he felt something unexpected. He felt safe. The realization unsettled him more than the security report. Ethan, Adrian said. Quietly. Why are you so calm? Ethan looked at him. Because you are not alone anymore. Adrian held his gaze. It was the first time Ethan had said something that sounded less like a professional statement and more like a promise. And Adrian did not know why, but for the first time in years, he wanted to believe one. By the next morning, Adrian had made a decision he never thought he would make. He was going to trust Ethan. Not completely, not blindly, but enough to let him investigate the people closest to him. The problem was that trust became complicated when the first person Ethan questioned was Marcus Reed. "I want to be clear," Adrian said as they stood inside his office. "Marcus has been with me for 8 years. Ethan nodded. "I understand. He helped build this company." "I understand that too." Adrian studied him. "Then why are you looking into him?" Ethan placed a folder on the desk. "Because yesterday, he knew information that only 3 people should have known." Adrian opened the folder. Inside were copies of meeting schedules, internal reports, and records showing that Marcus had attended several private meetings immediately before confidential information appeared outside the company. "That is circumstantial," Adrian said. "Yes. Then why are you showing me this?" Ethan looked at him. "Because I do not want you to make a decision based on emotion." Adrian closed the folder. "You think I am emotional? I think you trust Marcus." "That is not an answer. It is the reason I am being careful." Adrian stared at him. Ethan was not accusing Marcus. He was not accusing anyone. He was simply gathering facts. Somehow, that made Adrian trust him even more. "What do you want to do?" Adrian asked. "Nothing yet." "Nothing. We watch." Adrian frowned. "You want to wait?" "I want to see what happens when we change nothing." That afternoon, Adrian went about his normal schedule. He attended meetings, reviewed financial reports, and spoke with members of the board. Ethan stayed nearby, almost invisible. Adrian began noticing things he had never noticed before. Who entered a room? Who left early? Who checked their phone during private conversations? Who seemed nervous when certain topics came up? By 5 o'clock, Adrian was exhausted. He walked into his office and found Ethan standing near the window. "You have been quiet all day," Adrian said. "I am thinking." "That is becoming your favorite answer." Ethan turned. "You have a visitor." Adrian frowned. "Who?" "Marcus." Adrian looked toward the door. "Did he say why?" "No, did you ask?" "He asked to see you alone." Adrian looked at Ethan. "And?" "I told him no." Adrian stared. "You told him no? You are meeting with him here." "This is my office." "Exactly." Adrian should have been annoyed. Instead, he felt a strange sense of relief. "Send him in." Ethan moved toward the door, but Adrian stopped him. "Wait." Ethan turned. Adrian hesitated. "Stay." Ethan's expression changed slightly. It was almost impossible to notice, but Adrian did. A small shift. A quiet acknowledgement. "Of course," Ethan said. Marcus entered a moment later. He looked relaxed, but Adrian immediately noticed something different. Marcus did not look at him first. He looked at Ethan. Only for a second. But Ethan noticed too. "Adrian," Marcus said, "I wanted to speak with you about tomorrow's board meeting." "What about it?" Marcus placed a folder on the desk. "There are concerns about the acquisition." Adrian glanced at the folder. "What concerns?" "Financial exposure. Timing. A few members think you are moving too quickly." Adrian opened the folder. The information was accurate, but something felt wrong. Ethan stepped closer to the desk. Marcus looked at him again. "Is he always here now?" Adrian looked up. "Yes." Marcus smiled politely. "I see." Ethan said nothing. Marcus continued. "I was only wondering because this is a sensitive business matter." Adrian closed the folder. "Then you should be careful what you say." Marcus's smile faded. "Of course." The meeting ended 10 minutes later. After Marcus left, Adrian remained silent. Ethan watched the door. "What?" Adrian finally asked. He was nervous. Adrian looked at him. "About what?" "You. Why would he be nervous around me?" Ethan shook his head. "Not because you are the CEO." Adrian waited. Ethan looked directly at him. "Because he knows you are starting to ask questions." Adrian's expression hardened. "You think Marcus is involved?" "I think he knows more than he is telling you." Adrian looked down at the folder. For years, Marcus had been one of the few people Adrian trusted without hesitation. Now, for the first time, that trust felt fragile. "Ethan," Adrian said quietly, "if Marcus is involved, I want the truth." Ethan nodded. "You will have it." Adrian looked at him. "Even if I do not like it?" "Especially then." Adrian held his gaze. There was something about Ethan's certainty that made Adrian believe him. But then Ethan added one final sentence. "There is something else." Adrian's stomach tightened. "What?" Ethan reached for another folder. "I found out who used Claire's access card." He placed it on the desk. Adrian opened it. The name on the report made his heart stop. It was not Marcus. It was someone Adrian had trusted even more. Adrian stared at the report, unable to speak. The name printed at the top belonged to someone he had trusted for nearly a decade. Daniel Brooks, his chief financial officer, had been beside him through every major decision, every difficult negotiation, and every crisis that had threatened the company. If the report was accurate, Daniel had used Claire's access card to enter the executive floor after midnight. But Adrian could not understand why. "There has to be an explanation," he said. Ethan stood across from the desk, watching him carefully. "There might be." Adrian looked up. "You sound like you do not believe the report." "I believe the report. I do not know what it means yet." Adrian picked up the folder again. "Then why did you show me?" "Because you deserve to know what I find." Adrian studied him. "Even when it hurts." Ethan's voice softened. "Especially then." That answer stayed with Adrian. He had expected Ethan to be cold, professional, detached. Instead, Ethan had become the one person who seemed determined to protect Adrian from the truth without hiding it from him. "I want to speak with Daniel," Adrian said. Ethan immediately shook his head. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because if he knows we found the access record, we lose the advantage." Adrian leaned against the desk. "You really think he is involved?" "I think someone is." Ethan opened the report and pointed to the timestamp. Daniel entered the executive floor at 12:43 in the morning. He stayed for 9 minutes. Then he left. "What did he access?" "Nothing." Adrian frowned. "Then why was he there?" Ethan looked at him. "That is the question." The rest of the day passed slowly. Adrian tried to work, but his attention kept returning to Daniel. Every memory now felt uncertain. Every conversation seemed to carry a second meaning. By 6 o'clock, Adrian could no longer sit still. He walked toward the elevator, Ethan following. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked. "Home." "Your apartment?" "Yes." Ethan stopped. "That is not a good idea." Adrian turned. "Why?" "Because you have never had a security review there." Adrian stared at him. "I have lived there for 6 years." "Exactly." Adrian sighed. "You are going to tell me that everything I own is suddenly dangerous." "No. I am telling you that I do not know who has access." Adrian looked away. Ethan was right again. Somehow, that was becoming a habit Adrian did not know whether to appreciate or resent. They returned to Adrian's apartment in a quiet building overlooking Central Park. Ethan walked through the rooms, checking windows, doors, and entry points without touching anything unnecessarily. Adrian watched from the living room. "Do you ever stop working?" Ethan asked. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That is my question." Ethan looked at him. "What? Do you ever stop being my bodyguard?" Ethan hesitated. "Not while I am responsible for you." Adrian felt something shift inside him. The answer was professional, completely professional. Yet there was something reassuring about it. "You know," Adrian said, "I have spent years making sure no one gets too close." Ethan looked at him. "Why?" Adrian walked toward the window. The city lights reflected against the glass. "Because the last time I trusted someone completely, I lost more than money." Ethan did not ask for details. He simply stood beside him. That silence meant more to Adrian than questions ever could. After a moment, Ethan said, "You do not have to tell me." Adrian looked at him. "Why not?" "Because trust is not something you owe me." Adrian's expression softened. "Then why are you still here?" Ethan answered without hesitation. "Because I chose to be." Adrian looked away quickly, unsettled by the warmth in his chest. Before he could respond, Ethan's phone vibrated. He checked the screen. His expression changed. "What is it?" Adrian asked. Ethan looked at him. "Someone just accessed your office." Adrian's heart tightened. "Who?" "Security says the person used Daniel's credentials." Adrian stood perfectly still. Ethan continued, "But Daniel is downstairs in the lobby." Adrian looked toward the door. "Then someone else has his information." Ethan nodded. "Or someone wants us to think he does." Adrian finally understood. The person behind everything was not simply trying to get information. They were trying to make Adrian distrust the people around him. And it was working. Adrian turned toward Ethan. "What do we do now?" Ethan held his gaze. "Now you trust me." For once, Adrian did not hesitate. "I do." Ethan seemed almost surprised by the answer. Adrian realized that he meant it. He did not know why. He did not know how. But in a world where every familiar face suddenly carried questions, Ethan was the one person Adrian could look at without wondering what he wanted from him. And that frightened Adrian more than he was willing to admit. The next morning, Adrian woke before his alarm for the first time in years. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same details repeating in his mind. Daniel's credentials, the late-night access, the unknown caller, the person who had entered his office without taking anything, and Ethan's quiet promise that Adrian was not alone anymore. When Adrian arrived at Whitmore Tower, Ethan was already waiting in the lobby. "You are early," Ethan said. Adrian looked at his watch. "You are earlier. I have been here for an hour." Adrian studied him. "Do you ever go home?" Ethan gave him the faintest smile. "Sometimes." They walked toward the private elevator. Adrian noticed something different immediately. Ethan was quieter than usual. "What happened?" Adrian asked. "Nothing." "That is not true." Ethan pressed the elevator button. "You are getting better at reading people." Adrian looked at him. "I am learning from you." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, "I reviewed the security records from last night." Adrian's expression tightened. "And the person who accessed your office did not use Daniel's credentials." Adrian turned toward him. "You just said they did." "That is what the system recorded." "Then what changed?" Ethan looked directly at him. "The system was manipulated." Adrian felt a wave of disbelief. "Someone changed the records?" "Yes." "Can you prove it?" "I can prove someone tried." The elevator reached the executive floor. Ethan led Adrian into his office and placed a new report on the desk. "There are two separate access logs," he explained. "The first shows Daniel's credentials. The second shows an administrative override." Adrian looked at the information. "Who has administrative access?" Ethan paused. "That is the problem." Adrian slowly looked up. "Who?" "You." Silence filled the room. Adrian stared at him. "That is impossible. Your credentials were used to authorize the override." "I was at home." "I know." Adrian stood and walked toward the window. "Then someone has access to my accounts." Ethan nodded. "Or someone inside the company has been using your identity." Adrian turned around. "For how long?" "I do not know." That answer frightened him more than any threat could have. His entire life was built around control. His company, his finances, his reputation. Now someone had found a way to move through his world while making it look as though Adrian himself had authorized every step. "Why would someone do this?" Adrian asked. Ethan considered the question. "To make you distrust everyone." Adrian looked at him. "And it is working." Ethan stepped closer. "That is what they want." "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Trust the evidence." Adrian gave him a bitter smile. "The evidence says I cannot trust anyone." Ethan's voice softened. "Not exactly." Adrian looked at him. Ethan continued. "The evidence says someone wants you to believe that." Adrian studied his face. "And you? What about me? How do I know you are not part of this?" Ethan became completely still. The question hung between them. Adrian immediately regretted asking it, but Ethan did not look offended. He simply nodded. "You do not." Adrian's chest tightened. "Then why are you so calm?" Ethan looked toward the city outside. "Because I knew you would eventually ask." Adrian frowned. "You expected me to suspect you?" "I would be worried if you did not." Adrian walked closer. "Why?" Ethan finally looked at him. "Because I am the newest person in your life. I appeared at the exact moment everything became complicated. If you trusted me without question, I would be concerned." Adrian did not know what to say. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Everyone else wanted his confidence. Ethan wanted him to question everything. "Then tell me something," Adrian said. "What do you know that you have not told me?" Ethan hesitated. For the first time, Adrian saw something uncertain in his expression. "There is one thing." Adrian waited. Ethan reached into his jacket and placed a photograph on the desk. Adrian picked it up. The picture showed him leaving Whitmore Tower 3 nights earlier. Ethan was standing several feet behind him. Adrian frowned. "Who took this?" "I do not know." Adrian turned the photograph over. There was a handwritten message on the back. His expression changed. "What does it say?" Ethan asked. Adrian looked up. "It says, 'The only person you trust is the person you should fear.'" Ethan's face became unreadable. Adrian slowly lowered the photograph. The words should have made him question Ethan. Instead, something unexpected happened. Adrian looked at the man standing in front of him and realized that he did not feel afraid. He felt safe. And that was exactly why the message worked so well. Whoever had sent it understood one thing about Adrian. If they could make him doubt Ethan, they could make him doubt the only person he had finally begun to trust. Adrian did not sleep that night. The photograph remained on his desk, face down beneath a stack of reports, but he could still feel its presence. The message had been designed to create doubt, and Adrian knew it. The question was whether Ethan understood that too. "You should go home," Ethan said. Adrian looked up. "You keep saying that. Because you keep refusing to rest. And you keep refusing to answer my questions." Ethan paused. "Which questions?" Adrian pointed toward the photograph. "Who took it? Who sent it? How did they know about you?" Ethan's expression remained calm. "I do not know. You really expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to believe what I can prove." Adrian stood and walked toward the window. "Then prove something." Ethan approached the desk and opened another file. The photograph was taken from across the street 3 nights ago. The person who took it was positioned where they could see the entrance to your building. Adrian looked at the image again. "Why 3 nights ago?" "Because that was the night you first met me." Adrian froze. Ethan continued. "Someone was watching you before I became your bodyguard." Adrian slowly turned toward him. "So this has nothing to do with you?" "Not entirely." "What does that mean?" Ethan looked down at the photograph. "It means someone may have been waiting for the right moment to approach you." Adrian felt his thoughts racing. "You think they sent you?" "No." "Then what do you think?" Ethan hesitated. "I think your situation was already developing before I arrived." Adrian searched his face. "And you just happened to be assigned to me?" "Yes." "By whom?" Ethan gasped. The name of Daniel's assistant was Lucas Bennett. Adrian knew him well enough to recognize his face, but not well enough to remember the last time they had spoken. Lucas had worked in the finance department for nearly 3 years, always quiet, always efficient, and almost completely invisible. Now his face was staring back at Adrian from a photograph taken outside Whitmore Tower. "That cannot be a coincidence," Adrian said. Ethan looked at the image. "Probably not. He works for Daniel." "Yes." "And Daniel's credentials were used to access my office." Ethan nodded. "Which means we have 2 possibilities. Either Lucas is involved, or someone is using him." Adrian looked at the photograph again. "How do we find out?" "We ask him." Adrian immediately shook his head. "No, we do not warn him." Ethan's expression changed slightly. "Good." Adrian looked at him. "Good. You are finally thinking like someone who wants answers." Adrian gave him a tired smile. "You are becoming very comfortable criticizing your employer. You are becoming very comfortable listening." The exchange felt strangely normal, considering everything that had happened. Adrian realized how much had changed between them in less than 2 weeks. At first, Ethan had been a stranger he could barely tolerate. Now, Ethan was the person Adrian trusted most in the building. That realization should have frightened him. Instead, it felt natural. They arranged a quiet meeting with Lucas that afternoon. Adrian told him he wanted to discuss financial records, while Ethan waited nearby. Lucas arrived exactly on time. He looked nervous before Adrian said a single word. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Cole?" Adrian nodded. "Yes. I have a few questions." Lucas sat down. His hands remained folded on the table. Adrian studied him carefully. "Do you know Daniel used his credentials last night?" Lucas's eyes widened. "No." Ethan stood near the window. "Do you know someone used Claire's access card?" Lucas looked at Adrian. "No." Adrian leaned forward. "Then why were you outside this building 3 nights ago?" Lucas went completely still. The silence answered more than words could have. Adrian's expression hardened. "You were there." Lucas looked toward Ethan. "I can explain." "Then explain." Lucas swallowed. "I was following someone." Ethan stepped away from the window. "Who?" Lucas hesitated. "Daniel." Adrian stared at him. "Why?" "Because I thought he was hiding something." Adrian exchanged a glance with Ethan. "What did you see?" Lucas lowered his voice. "Daniel met someone from a consulting firm. They talked about the acquisition." Adrian felt his stomach tighten. "When?" 3 nights ago." "Where?" "Across the street from the tower." Ethan asked, "Did you take the photograph?" Lucas shook his head. "No. I saw someone else taking pictures." Adrian stood. "Who?" Lucas looked frightened. Now, but his voice remained steady. "I do not know. I only saw the person from a distance." Ethan moved closer. "What did the person do after Daniel left?" Lucas looked at Adrian. "They followed you." The room fell silent. Adrian remembered that night. He had left the building alone. He had not noticed anyone. He had not thought he needed to. "Why did you not tell me?" Adrian asked. Lucas looked down. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of Daniel?" "No." Lucas slowly raised his eyes. "Afraid of whoever was watching him." Ethan's expression became serious. What else do you know? Lucas hesitated. Daniel has been meeting someone for months. Adrian's heart sank. Who? I do not know the name. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table. But I know where they meet. Adrian opened the paper. An address was written there. Ethan looked at it and immediately recognized the location. That is the consulting firm's office. Adrian looked at him. Then we go there. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. Adrian frowned. Why? Because we finally have something they do not know we have. Adrian understood. For the first time, they had a real advantage. The people behind the deception still believed Adrian was confused, isolated, and uncertain about whom to trust. They did not know that Adrian had stopped playing their game. He looked at Ethan. Then what do we do? Ethan answered quietly. We let them make the next move. 2 days later, Daniel requested a private meeting with Adrian. He arrived without warning, carrying a single folder. Adrian invited him inside, while Ethan remained nearby. Daniel placed the folder on the desk. I think you deserve to know the truth, he said. Adrian looked at him. About what? Daniel took a breath. About the acquisition. Adrian waited. Daniel's voice lowered. Someone inside this company has been selling confidential information. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Who? Daniel looked toward the door. Then he looked directly at Ethan. Your bodyguard. For 1 second, Adrian said nothing. Ethan remained perfectly still. Daniel continued. I have evidence. Adrian felt the old fear return, but this time it was different. He knew exactly what was happening. Someone was making one final attempt to destroy the only trust Adrian had left. Adrian slowly turned toward Ethan. Ethan met his eyes. No explanation. No defense. Just certainty. And in that moment, Adrian understood the truth. The person he had once trusted without question had become the person he needed to question most. The man he had once questioned every day had become the only man he could trust.